Our message really is that basically every bite of food you take is coming from a place that's either degrading the planet or it can be from a system that's regenerating the planet. And it's just that awareness raising that we do have these choices, and the food that we're producing here, we're selling it for no more expensive than what you get at local butcher shop. It is more expensive than a probably supermarket, but Joel Salatin will say that there's no such thing as cheap food. It's either the environment's paying for it or your health's going to pay for it. So what we're trying to do is be fair and transparent with what we're doing, and knowing that any money that we do make out of growing and selling food is reinvested back into the land.
This is the Ryan Marketing Show, and you're listening to episode 73 of 100. Today on the show, I have Greg and Rachel Hart from Mangarara Farms, and we're going to be talking about regenerative farming practices, what that means for farming in general, and how this is a better way to not only farm, but a better way to produce food for our community and for our planet. And a new subscription-based service which brings this all to reality called the Meat Box, and how you can be part of it and vote with your dollars in a way that helps everyone, including what you put on the dinner plate. Let's have a listen now to what Greg and Rachel have to say.
Before we start, it's interesting, we kind of, as Rachel knows, I kind of hover between, I think the good stuff that we're doing on our farm and we're not doing enough. And just waking up this morning and looking at, pictures of Christchurch and fire, and look out our window and the lake's as low as it's ever been, and, just reading stuff about, climate change and a whole lot of stuff. I think, shit. So, if you interviewed me yesterday, it might be quite different. It's and I think a lot of people are probably in that. That sort of torn between two worlds kind of at the moment.
I think you're right. I think there's also an aspect to it that we will look back historically and go, can you believe that we were ignoring things?
Yeah.
Like, I'm walking through Tennyson Street, Napier yesterday, and it's a glorious day for the 50th in a row minus a couple. The weather's been 30 to 34 degrees. We've got cruise ships coming in. It is paradise.
Yes, it's coming.
And yet, none of us realise that why it is the way it is, and that's not a good thing, because it might be 38 degrees and 40 degrees in 10 years. And then it's not just the tomatoes not growing, it's lots of other things. And that actually we've got it easy here, and there's other countries that won't have a viable GDP because of the change that's going to happen. So I think, but how do you get that message out? And I guess this we'll cover today. Is how do you get that message out without sounding or being put into that corner of
scaremongering?
Or that's the edge. That's anti-economy or anti-productivity. Environments diametrically opposed to all that. How do you get both right? Because some really good systems that scale.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff.
Sheep, lamb, those systems. Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. This is one that I'll just read out of that thing that I read this morning. It's 3:23 in the morning, and I'm awake because my great-great-grandchildren won't let me sleep. My great-great-grandchildren ask me in dreams, "What did you do while the planet was plundered? What did you do when the earth was unravelling?" It's like, shit. And that's a question that we've been asking for a long time. That I got back in 2008. Someone, just made that statement. What are you going to tell your grandkids? What did you do? So,
our kids. It's not just our grandkids.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
But it's got to start with what can you do within your realm.
Yeah, but anything's possible, and and it's quite different, I think, to the current world. Just looking at sustainability, and again in that article, a woman who I've been following for quite some time, Joanna Macy, you heard of her, an American lady. She said the most radical thing we can do on Earth right now is be fully present to what's happening, and without denial, and she sort of comes from a Buddhist type background, which is non-attachment to a degree, because I guess to fully feel what it must be like for those millions of refugees, for the species that go extinct, for all the unravelling that's happening at the moment, to feel that but not to be bogged down by it, but to be able to release it, and then to take positive action to try and
isn't that quite hard to do though, when the thing that you immediately in your own vicinity can feel is the weather's better. We hear wineries are going to do well over the next 5 to 10 years as things warm up, like at a micro level, which is the way we will experience our world. Yeah. It's actually pretty good.
Yeah, but there's also all those water issues tied into that, and all those discussions about do we need a dam, and what's the state of our rivers, and the aquifers at a record low, and people are getting sick, and from the water side, which again, the sun's shining, but there's all this other stuff, and as far as connecting all the dots.
So that's interesting, which I don't think those dots are connected at all. It's seen as a water issue, not as a environment, global, how we're purchasing and where we're buying and sourcing our food from.
Yeah, it's all connected. And I guess my take is climate change isn't the issue. Climate change is a symptom of basically most humanity's worldview at the moment of the way we see the world, and it's just
the economic system. It's a symptom of the economic system.
Yeah, and the economic symptom is again another, not the issue. It's a symptom of which, for me, all distills down to connection, and the lack of connection that humanity have now got from the natural world and from other people and from life. Because we wouldn't do what we do knowingly, if we had a close connection, if we saw those people in Syria or Bangladesh or something like that as family, or had that close connection. And also, like Indigenous people, I don't think, we would do what we do to the rivers and stuff like that if we had that closer connection. I think most of the issues, boil down to connection.
And that becomes more challenging where you've got population migration towards cities, not away from it.
Yeah.
Over half the planet now lives in a city.
Yeah.
And I lived in London for 9 years, and for that period of time, you just go to the supermarket and buy what I wanted to eat. And it wasn't until I came back here in 2010 and I was complaining to someone saying, why are red peppers so expensive? Like, it's July, like it's winter.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, shouldn't there just be things here all the time? It's a supermarket. I wasn't even tuned in to seasonality.
Yeah.
And it struck me how much I'd taken for granted that a supermarket should provide the world rather than just what's seasonal.
Yeah, and that's connection.
And your environment.
And what we're trying to, the whole thing about the farm, what we're doing is ultimately connecting people back to the land and using food as that medium to connect. And, Joel Salatin talks about food being your ecological umbilical cord, which, connects you to the ecosystem that you depend on for life. And it's making this building it's not a business, although we have to operate it as a business. yeah, it's basically there for connecting people back to the land and food.
So on this farm on Mangarara, that wasn't always the way necessarily. So farming's changed a lot, and this is one of the oldest farms probably in Hawke's Bay, if not New Zealand. 1850.
Yeah, in the 1850s, it was part of a larger estate, obviously at that time. But in a Hawke's Bay context, the Tiffin and the Nean families brought sheep up the coast from the Wairarapa and brought them in to Hawke's Bay, and Elms Hill and this area was one of the first farms in Hawke's Bay to farm sheep. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right. They were first to bring them up the coast.
And obviously that's a long period of time between then and now, 170 years. What are some of the biggest practices that have changed in farming over that time, and then from there, how much further have we got to go to get to a place where you do have regenerative farming?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess it first began as a colonial extractive type process, going to the colonies to see what we can produce to send home to Mother England and
make another England.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what they saw the land as, surely. Yeah, that's why all the trees came down and things, because we have to make green pastures like home.
Yeah.
So they saw England as the blueprint to replicate in New Zealand.
That's just my generalisation, but I mean that's what they basically did. They brought the trees over that they liked from home, like the oaks and the, it must have been incredible when you come to New Zealand and it was just covered in bush, foreign birds. I'd imagine that's what they wanted to do, and they knew it was good, rich land, so farm it. So we farm it like we do in England because that's what we know.
Yeah.
And yet this land had never had cloven hoofed animals on it.
No, so it's quite different. It is imposing man's ideas onto the landscape. Yes, and so I guess like the journey since then has been, just as a farming, extractive, business production model, and
the chemical fertilisers that arrived after World War II.
Yeah, to really kick that along. And I guess the journey for us began around about the year 2000, and it was, I guess, at that time, like we had our first child, and then also, for me anyway, the farming journey is kind of like it has been a deeper understanding, like spiritual journey in that, and sort of knowledge, and you start digging deeper into things and asking why. And it began when we were thinking about the future we're going to leave for our children, and thinking, well, New Zealand, pastoral agriculture is the backbone of our economy, but that pastoral production at the moment is based on bringing in phosphate fertilisers from North Africa, because we've already dug out Nauru, and our whole pastoral system is only going to function while, first of all, there's that abundant phosphate, but secondly, while there's abundant cheap energy that allows us to dig it up and then truck it and then ship it and then truck it and then process it and then truck it and then fly it on your farms. So, and as I learn more about the fossil fuel industry, and the peak oil thing has certainly been kicked down the track with fracking, but at massive expense to both environment, water, and climate, and so that isn't going to be around forever. And again, there is some amazing energy technologies, but there's nothing as nutrient dense as oil and fossil fuel. And so basically learning that, and with climate change issues, realising that we have to get a lot of fossil fuels out of our food, because basically at the moment we're eating oil. Everything is a derivative of oil because of the energy involved in producing it. And like American figures which say that for every calorie of food that we consume, it takes close to 10 calories to produce it and transport it and store it and everything. And so, again, on just a simple thing, you just know if you're using more energy to get your food than what you get out of consuming it, then that's not a very sustainable thing. And so
So you've got then two pressures. You've got a pressure to move back to historically when that wasn't the case, when it was more around local farming and local agriculture providing to a local community, yet we can't turn back the population clock to 1 billion people. We're at 7 now, we're heading quickly towards 9, 10 billion. How do you balance the needs to feed a planet versus also just look after your local community in a way that helps nurture the natural environment rather than artificially places man's will on?
Yeah, well, you could say we can't turn back, but we could just keep doing what we're doing and Mother Nature will turn it back for us. Yeah. Because, again, it's just that disconnect and not understanding the whole sort of ecological system with, populations. And there's plenty of examples of, whether it be deer on an island or something like that, the population grows and grows until it collapses. And I think, there's global footprint studies and stuff like that showing how we are over-consuming the planet at the moment. And so basically it comes down to a choice whether we wind it back by, clever design, or we just wait for disaster, because in the end we'll get the same result. Well, not the same result, but and again, I think we definitely have the technology and knowledge to produce food and to feed people. Obviously, there's a whole lot of waste in the system at the moment. That's wasted food, but again, at the moment, it's just whether or not we have the political and social will to turn it around, because there's too much focus on the monetary side of producing food. And most people would probably see a farming enterprise as making money, but it's to take it back and realise that we're stewards of the land, and also to be producing quality food for people.
So you mentioned there's three elements of the whole equation. You've got how people consume, the farming practices themselves, and then the political or policy regulation environment that encapsulates all of that. Where does the change need to start, or what are some of the things in each of those areas that could kick it forward further?
Yeah, well, I guess again back to this farm, and the way we're doing it is trying to connect people back to the farm, and with the whole restorative plans that we have for the farm, through building carbon in the soil and sequestering carbon from the atmosphere and putting it back in the soil, and a whole lot of tree planting initiatives and restoring ecosystems, and as well as that is by restoring soils. They're the most natural filter for water and clean water, and so there's a whole lot of benefits around that, which is broadly termed regenerative agriculture at this stage.
Which means
ecological agriculture, which is while you produce food, you can be improving soils and increasing biodiversity, and helping clean water, and our message really is that basically every bite of food you take is coming from a place that's either degrading the planet, or it can be from a system that's regenerating the planet. And it's just that awareness raising that we do have these choices, and the food that we're producing here, we're selling it for no more expensive than what you get at local butcher shop. It is more expensive than a probably supermarket, but Joel Salatin will say that there's no such thing as cheap food. It's either the environment's paying for it or your health's going to pay for it. So what we're trying to do is be fair and transparent with what we're doing, and knowing that any money that we do make out of growing and selling food is reinvested back into the land and the community, and for education, and also part of changing to a new economy is charitable ends, which are a big focus of what we do. And I guess our ultimate measure of success is going to be how much we can give away.
That's a great aspiration to be able to hold, because it's bigger than what you're doing on the farm. What you just mentioned there around, I think it's the meat box product, is that's most likely to be the first time someone's going to have something from Mangarara Farm, unless they're going to drive out here to visit the lodge. What are some of the things that they're getting in that meat box that you won't get from a sirloin or porterhouse or beef steak from a supermarket? What are some of the values of how you do your farming that then are intrinsically inside that product?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess ultimately our farming system is all about being carbon centric, and so from what I've seen, a regenerative agriculture and sequestering carbon is the most realistic solution to climate change, as well as reducing consumption and population issues and that as well. But
so providing more areas where carbon goes back into
the soil and into the trees that we're planting, and because my understanding is if we stop using fossil fuels tomorrow, there's already too much carbon in the atmosphere, for us to have a thriving, healthy future, and so we need to start getting it back out. And the soil is the biggest carbon sink on the planet, more than trees and what have you. But in a system where trees and pastures and grazing animals, and with the animals that we produce, particularly cattle, we're still it's definitely a work in progress, and we're not there yet on our sheep models. But through cattle we use a system called holistic grazing, which is again nature is our guide with a lot of what we're doing on the farm, and this system was developed by a Zimbabwean man called Alan Savory, and he was observing how in Africa on the Great Plains big mobs of buffalo moved around, and obviously European times, and massive mobs of millions, and the same is happening with the bison in America, millions in a mob, but they're on a really big long rotation, and so they're going through really tall pasture and just grazing as they went along.
And walking and eating.
And they were constantly
on the move.
There's
always a wolf behind them.
A wolf or a lion or something, and as they sort of walk on that tall grass, their dung and urine goes down on it, and
they're breaking.
And they're trampling. Yeah, and it basically it's like forming a compost on top of the soil as they move and through that, lots of animals, and over time that built the deepest, richest, fertile soils on the planet. And so there's a lot of cattle get a lot of bad rap, in environmental circles around the world, and a lot of that is justified through the CAFO, the feedlot operations in America, and even in New Zealand there is obviously overstocking and issues with nutrients going into waterways. But again, it's the cattle aren't the problem; it's how they're managed.
Right. So for consumers thinking, I'm not going to eat meat because all farming practices are the same, even if they love meat, there is actually an alternative if they look a little bit further into where that food is coming from and how that's been created and the values of those farmers.
Absolutely, because it's an essential part of the solution. I think a quote that I just read recently was regenerative agriculture is the foundation of the future of civilization, and because we absolutely have to be producing food in a way that is regenerating the planet and sequestering carbon, as opposed to the opposite.
Is it just you as a lone voice here, you two, Greg and Rachel, talking about regeneration, regenerative farming practices, when your farm here is 600 hectares or so?
Yeah.
Are you on your own, or are there hundreds of thousands of hectares in New Zealand being moved towards this way of farming?
There is a lot in New Zealand, moving to biological management systems, and like we had a workshop here last year, and I think it was about 40 odd people came looking at holistic grazing. And so there's definitely other people out there doing it, and on a global scale, there's even more. And New Zealand, I guess because of our scientific models at the moment being so commercially driven, there's not a lot of research, and I mean, we're really lucky. We've got a young guy here who's a Nuffield scholar last year and been travelling the world looking at a lot of these regenerative agriculture type farming practices. And so if we can get selling meat boxes and get people supporting what we're doing, we hope to put a bit more science around what we're achieving and getting some good monitoring and measuring in place to back up the statements we're making, which at the moment are merely observations and what we're learning and hearing from overseas farming.
Great. So it's more you're committed to going in this way, which is good for the planet and good for people. And that it is a journey, and that if those who are buying the meat boxes are supporting your farming practices on that journey, but also getting a better quality product. Yep,
it is. It's top quality meat that we're producing, and obviously animal welfare is a prime focus. And I guess the other thing is we're talking about the bad rap that meat gets. I'm interested to hear where people that don't eat meat, where their food's coming from, because we had a friend locally who was a vegetarian, and they also environmentally aware and thought, well, we should be eating a local diet as part of being environmentally friendly. But as a vegetarian, they were eating rice, and encourage people to check out how much methane is produced from rice paddies around the planet. That's right up there. And they would be eating pasta. We don't really do pasta in New Zealand. They were importing pulses, lentils, stuff like that. So a vegetarian diet to get sufficient carbohydrates and energy that they need into that is all imported from overseas, and who knows how that's produced. So I think it's really, again, really important for people to understand where their food's coming from and how it's produced, not just whether it's got meat in it or whether it's vegetarian. That's far too simple.
What then happens for some of these emerging economies when they catch up with what our Western tastes have been for some time, and enjoying a good steak in the evening? And what happens when a Vietnam or an Indonesia or a China catches on to this way of eating? Even with all the right farming practices, is that even a possibility?
Don't know if you can push it onto those. I haven't done those numbers, but I know that the systems and the systems that we are hoping to mimic, come from a lot of those even Asian systems, and that again they're really knowledge intensive type food production systems. And I've heard of again another driver for what we do here is good farmers in Hawke's Bay are producing about 300 kgs of meat and fibre per hectare per year, and what I'd claim is largely on an unsustainable basis by bringing in nutrients from the other side of the world, whereas food production systems in Asia and that have been producing 30 tonnes of food per hectare per year, but without relying on these inputs. And so we're so far behind, and
I thought we were ahead. How can they be doing 30 tonnes?
It's just a whole lot more intensive, more people on the land.
And they're small farmers, they're feeding their families, so they've learned to make the most of every inch. Is that right?
I heard it's quite interesting. A guy who's into this kind of Asian agriculture was saying he had a delegation from China come over, and they came to a farm and said, 1,000 acres and one family. He says, you must be very bad farmer or very greedy. Whereas a 1,000-acre farm around here is barely sustaining one family. So, there's some big shifts that we can make.
Interesting. So I just had John Farquharson on the show, and he runs a company called Hawke's Bay Solar, and he was talking about this move away from the grid because consumers are going to be generating their own electricity through solar, and that's going to create some breakpoints, because for 100 years the way we've sent energy to humans in houses and buildings is through this centralised model. Is it something similar where the centralised farming model needs to become more distributed and having
Absolutely.
more people in charge of creating their own food?
That's the way nature works. Yeah, totally. Everywhere. It's local everywhere.
What does that mean though for big farming blocks?
Well, again, where we're tracking on this place is understanding that it could be a whole lot more productive and a whole lot more profitable, and it means a whole lot more people on the land. And as I see at the moment, technology and displacing a lot of work in that, I think, and we're already seeing it with a lot of backpackers and that visit us from Europe or the States and that, looking for something meaningful to do with their lives. And I think there's nothing better than taking responsibility for caring for the earth and feeding people. And so I think it means more people going back onto the land.
Are there other farmers out there that are kind of listening and watching what you're doing, wondering when should I shift, or is it really something where it's going to take another generation to make the change?
Don't know. You don't know who's reading your website and that. So, but there's certainly interest and raising awareness. So, I think what we're doing, while it's still fringe and out there at the moment, there might be a bit of curiosity about it. And I guess the examples of what we're doing here on the farm is that we had a family, a New Zealand family who were lived in New York and London and done all that sort of thing, but they came back to New Zealand and wanting to raise their children and wanted to feed them good food and stuff like that. So they lived with us for 2.5 years, and while they were here, Shano helped, who's the manager, to build this lodge, but also we put in a dairy because getting more people back on the land, we did need to create more enterprises and sort of other income streams. And so we also built a little dairy at that time, and that rate, we use permaculture principles with what we do here, and like the dairy has 7 different functions. Permaculture meaning that things have multiple functions, multiple purposes, and so like the dairy, first of all, produces milk for the people living on the farm. It creates an income by rearing calves in the spring. We feed our pigs milk. We also soak our hens growing in milk. It's great for the tourism side of the business now with the lodge here. It is part of the education stuff that, we have school groups, and this group that's coming from America tomorrow, that'll be part of a learning experience for them. And secondly, any dung that does fall in the dairy shed, we scoop it up and put it in a bucket and take it to our worm farms. So it's part of our nutrient management. And so, creating things like that have multi-purposes, and all the little enterprises like the pigs and the hens and other little profit centres.
So for a farm that's at the other edge is purely profit-driven now, whereas you're values-driven and then profit-driven, probably values, community, and then profit, where would a profit-driven farm start? Is it with dairy? Like, what would be their first part if they wanted to at least have one area of the farm where they could talk about the values and about why this is good for the next generation?
I'm not sure as far as the holistic grazing model, how well that would work on a big dairy farm. I mean, I guess they're doing it to an extent in that they do have big mobs of cattle and they are shifting them regularly, but reductionist science shows that if you keep your pasture between a certain length, then that's a maximum growing period. And a lot of what we've done, the issues we face is because of reductionist science, which, yes, if you just have your grass in this growing range and you put this fertiliser on, you're maximising production. But, where has that fertiliser come? What's the energy component? What is the health issues even associated to people that are consuming, from that fertiliser inputs? And, it's what is not being measured that's perhaps the issue. And so for the dairy farm, you could move to longer rotations, perhaps, and which is resting the grass for longer periods, and ensuring that perhaps there's more getting trampled back in. You can stack other little enterprises on behind it, like we have these portable hen houses which follow along behind the animals, the cattle, and again that's like based on watching nature, and those big mobs of cattle that we talked about on the plains of Africa or America always had a big flock of birds following along behind, scratching through the manure, eating the bugs and parasites, and with hens, they can be producing income from eggs as well. So, those are options, and always the first option for anybody is grow your own vegetables where you can. I guess any farm can do that.
Okay, so that's good advice for the farm side of things and for consumer. What about if there was something at a government level where we knew that there was 20 years left or 25 years? There's going to be a moment where everything switches. Let's just live in that pretend world for a second. What should the government be doing if that was the case? What would accelerate all of these changes happening? What would need to be removed regulation-wise or put in regulation-wise to switch to this type of farming?
Well, first of all, it's the economic drivers that push everything this way, and again the realisation that our current economic model is totally unsustainable. And as they say, the only people that think that we can have infinite growth on a finite planet are madmen or economists is particularly true. And we just have to look what global debt has done in the last decade, or the last 30 years even, and understand that debt is basically just bringing forward future consumption. Building this lodge, we built it with debt. We couldn't have done it until we generated the income, but we're doing that on a global scale at an exponential rate at the moment, and by racking up debt we're just bringing forward future consumption. And so the economic model has to change, and there's plenty of people doing work out there on an economic model based on ecological principles that does keep in balance with natural cycles, and that's an absolute must. And unfortunately nothing's going to change too much, I don't think, until we get that change of drivers. But given how unsustainable the economic model is, that will perhaps happen, and then people at that stage, it's where do we go from there? And again, it should be pretty obvious, and we had a really clear warning shot in 2008 that the economic model doesn't work, but it's managed to be propped back up again through massive debt since that time. But the reality is there for everyone to see. So the economic is a big one.
Myself. Take that time then.
Yeah.
Good.
Catch you later.
Thanks, Rachel. So we've had that shock, and we were talking earlier about when Mother Nature has a system that works, and then it gets oversaturated with too many animals, or there's not enough feed, that system implodes because it's too stressed.
Yeah.
So are we saying that as humans, if we don't write it for ourselves, then Mother Nature will ultimately
Absolutely.
write this for us, and it may not be something that is linear. It may be a break point where we can't get phosphates from Africa anymore, so farms have to completely change. But in order to change around, it's a multi-year thing to do because they haven't farmed
Or
like
if the
that.
boats just stop turning up, then you have to do it. And again, there's examples of all this. Cuba went through this in the 1980s, early 90s, and that where the oil ships just stopped turning up, and so they had to localise their agriculture and became organic sort of permaculture based pretty much overnight, and the population lost a lot of weight, but they basically got themselves sorted out and started producing food locally. And so those models exist of what can happen. It's just that I guess today a lot of people living in towns and just everywhere are perhaps have lost the ability to garden and grow food, and the issues around climate change and all the stuff that we're seeing is it's ultimately going to come down to food issue and availability, and wrapped in again with the ability of the fossil fuel that's involved in producing food at the moment. So I think it is all about localising, and local economies will be stronger, and my belief is that we could be happier and healthier just by taking a foot off the pedal, getting off the hamster wheel, and sitting back and realising that our true wealth is in the environment, in our communities, in our relationships, in our health, and all those stuff again, which is left off the GDP measures, and we still could thrive. And again, we're the lucky ones, I think, in a country like New Zealand, where we have this amazing, compared to other places in the world, underpopulated and still very good functioning environment.
I think we're almost seeing some of that in the news, where people in the US that have the option to travel or buy somewhere else, they're thinking, where is a place that I would like to live if I had to, because I couldn't live in the US, and they're looking at New Zealand. There was an article in The Guardian talking about New Zealand as a bolt hole. So really those people who are looking at doing that shouldn't just be buying real estate here, but buying it with a purpose to then feed that local community. Yeah,
they're coming and they're doing that to varying degrees. We were just down at a workshop thing, New Frontiers, which is two young Americans who've made a lot of money, it seems, in Silicon Valley, but with a real environmental social conscience, have come here and bought land, and really facilitating some discussions and conversations on how we make the changes to meet the challenges of the future. And they've set up what they call the Edmund Hillary Foundation in relationship with the New Zealand government, which is focusing on bringing in 100 change makers per year who are going to make significant change both in New Zealand and on a global perspective, and with the full backing of the New Zealand government to do that. And that's pretty exciting, and a lot of people are already expressing interest in lining up. That they get visas, and then there's a pathway through to residency.
It's kind of unique worldwide. I interviewed Bill Kermode on the show. He's the chief exec for Edmund Hillary Fellowship.
Cool.
And he was talking about, this is an opportunity for anyone around the world who believes they can make global impact either in their own country or by coming here and learning or using this as a place to incubate some of those ideas. What an amazing opportunity for both countries, not just New Zealand, who plays host, but also their home country and wherever that may be. Is there projects on the Mangarara farm that could potentially be available for someone who wants to apply for the Global Impact Visa and wants to be based here in Hawke's Bay?
Possibly, hadn't thought of that. But we talking to these guys down in Whiteman's Valley, they are on a very similar path to what we're doing, and as far as food production systems, and so no doubt we'll have pretty close links in the future, and we're looking at helping a young Japanese family come into the country at the moment, because there's a model in Japan. There's a book called The One Straw Revolution from a guy called Masanobu Fukuoka, who his book was The One Straw Revolution, and he calls it natural farming, and this guy was farming in Japan but too close to Fukushima, and his farm was covered in radiation, so he can't farm anymore, and I think he's quite concerned about other nuclear plants and that in Japan. And so if we can bring some of that knowledge and then demonstrate it here, and then also open it up for education and sharing, then that's what we're doing. And trees are a big part of our future and what we do. And another sort of guy that I respect a lot in what he's doing is Mark Shepherd, who wrote a book called Restoration Agriculture, and he states that any civilization that relies on annual agriculture collapses, except for one, which is us, but we're destroying soil at a great rate globally and in New Zealand. And so just at the moment, understanding that the world is largely fed on a few staple annual crops of corn, wheat, soy, rice, and all these basic staple diets rely on basically turning over soil, destroying the ecosystems of the soil every year, with a whole lot of energy involved in it, and then you have to do it all again next year, and so he's creating or designing systems over there. Nature is the guide once again, but perennial polycultures, which means perennial tree crops that go year after year. Polycultures, a lot of diversity in there, and using different layers of production, like you might have a chestnut tree above and hazelnuts down here and berries and ground thing, and he tries to get 7 layers of production. And what he's doing, once you've planted and established the system, it's there for thousands of years.
Wow.
You don't have to cultivate, and he's got universities involved with what he's doing. He's producing as much per acre as what the corn farmers around him are producing.
Right.
But you don't need all the high input systems, and all you have to do is basically harvest once you've got the system established. And so that's where we're having, and again, like our meat boxes are hopefully, our meat boxes are ultimately going to grow trees because we're going to integrate into that sort of system. But again, back to the vegetarian meat eating things, there's no vegetarian ecosystems. We need animals as part of systems to be cycling nutrients, and they need part of that system. And so it's just a total integrated system that we're heading to.
How does then the other trend that's happening around technology and automation and the less need for humans in jobs, when you were talking there about corn versus this layered approach to growing food, does that require more labour or?
Yeah, but probably would. But again, once you've got it established, it's kind of just population managing and harvesting is all they do. And he's part of an organic cooperative, and they're growing, I think it's sunflowers or something like that. And so all their machinery and equipment they use is made out on using biofuels, and their delivery van I think runs on biofuel created from what they're growing on the farm.
So it's really just at this stage requiring farming to take some of those steps and be the leading light and look at, hey, here's some best practices. We don't have it all right, and we don't pretend that we've got it all right, but we have got our value set 100% right, and we're moving towards this aspirational point. Now, you as a consumer, we've given you a choice. We're not 100% where we want to be yet, but our values are there. Now, if you want to join us on that journey, then any of those funds will go back to that value set rather than the other value set. And ours, for Mangarara Farm and the meat box, the value set will ensure that your kids can eat meat and come out to the lodge, and your grandkids, whereas the other may not.
It's about connection, and those every bite or every dollar that you spend is a vote for the future that you want to have. And so I guess it's an awareness, because I think ultimately most people want that, and as you say, we don't have it all figured out yet, but we know where our current system is heading. And so the way I see it, that's leading to a dead end. And although we don't know exactly where we're at, where we're heading, not where we're heading, but don't have all the answers yet, given the alternative, we have to try this way. And there is a lot of information around the planet showing that it can be very successful. And it's exciting, and it's just a whole lot more rewarding, and like the farming that we're doing now, the people that we get to meet, and just because we've taken this different pathway and planted trees, and just about there's no ordinary days on this farm. There's always some just amazing people just rock up and passing through, and it's just a completely different vibe.
I could see when I looked on your, there's a map of the whole farm. There's all these different areas you can walk around and mountain bike, and even stay in the lodge overlooking the lake where we are now. I think that's a fantastic thing to be able to offer, is to get people like myself who live in the city to go out back to nature. And on the way here, there was a rabbit running in front of my car. I'm like, man, I haven't seen a rabbit in like months, maybe even years.
There's lots of them out there.
Yeah. So the Eco Lodge here, this is something that people can hire and have workshops out at.
Yeah, it's probably designed for someone exactly like you, and that there's a lot of people my age. I mean, I've just turned 50, but people in their 40s who've got children, perhaps a little bit younger, growing up, who used to go out to farms or have a farm and stuff, that are growing up in Auckland or Wellington now, but want their children to experience some of the stuff that they had while they were growing up. And so I guess this was designed for a family or a couple of families to come and holiday and spend time. And while the parents love it, it's usually, we take anybody that wants to come out to milk the cows and feed the pigs and pick up the eggs and stuff like that, and kids just love it, and can't wait, don't want to leave or can't wait till they come back again. And so we've already, we've only been operating for less than 2 years, and a lot of people are repeat people, and we just want them to build that connection and give their children that experience, on a hopefully regular basis.
Isn't that great? And I think what I've enjoyed about our chat today, Greg, is that it hasn't just been about the business part. You're really about the values, about where you see the world going, and then your place in it, and what you can do to help influence things in a way where you can kind of hold your head high to your grandkids or great-grandkids, whether you meet them or not. They know that you did your bit at the time that mattered.
Yeah, that's cool. And just, as far as New Zealand agriculture changing, is just understanding that, the economic drivers which push us to do things, and we're not immune from it either. We've got debt, and so there's stuff, we are driven on that reality, but the economic model doesn't tell the whole truth. There's the cost of those fossil fuels and climate change, it's not factored into the equation, but understanding that there is a cost, and that cost is massive, starts pushing in a few different directions.
So certainly all of us need to be more aware and conscious of the decisions we're making, and question where we are getting our food from, and look at the value set of those producers, and then decide, are they aligned with where I want to be, or do I need to actually change my own value set to align where they're taking us?
Yeah, definitely, that's right.
I really appreciate our chat today, Greg, and also with Rachel here earlier. She's left now, but look, this is a fantastic place, and I think if anyone would serve them well to come out here and just sit where we are now overlooking the lake. This is a phenomenal spot you've built here.
Cool. Well, everyone's welcome, and our farm's open to the public, and I guess the journey is for us to let go of our fears and basically embrace, realise that we are all one, and we call ourselves a family farm because ultimately we are all family, and we encourage anyone and everyone to come and visit.
Good on you.
Cool.
Awesome, Greg.
Excellent.
Thanks.
Good.
If you like this episode, remember to subscribe for free on iTunes. Simply search for The Ryan Marketing Show in the iTunes Store.